Welcome, one and all, our valued viewers at home and abroad. This is Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital. WESN television with a difference because we are broadcasting truly in HD. Sean Michael Small here once again before you to speak about the important stories of the day. And of course, one big story is looming because I don't necessarily want to say that we got it wrong yesterday because it still might not work out to the eventual horrific conclusion that we are hoping to avoid. However, it's harder to say that with any certainty these days, given what has come down the news cycle pipe over the last 24 hours. Now, with that said, there are some other stories that I want to get into today, and later on I'll be speaking to the PRO of the UNC about a specific and interesting point brought up by the opposition leader that then goes into another story which has hit this week, or rather yesterday, with regards to child abuse reports in TNT. Before we get into all that, however, I do want to say one thing, something that I have been meaning to say since the start of the week, and that is the fact that the murder rate continues. It waits for no one. It might not be quite as stark or extreme as last year, but it's relatively speaking, right? Because we're well over 500 murders, and we're going to probably touch upon 6, if not cross 6. Now, the question is, will the authorities tout it as a victory because we have a lower murder rate? Because realistically speaking, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a lower murder rate than last year. Is that a good thing? First of all, I wonder if the murder detection rate is also significantly lower than last year. 75 out of the 600 murders, I believe. I'm not entirely sure if out of that 75 there were murder cases from years previously. That might be true. So it might be bad all around. However, there's also the fact that, look, if the authorities come out and say, hey, we had over 600 last year, we have 599 this year, we're better, 580. Like, at what point does the murder rate become acceptable? At what point is it an accomplishment to say, hey, we're 20 less, 30 less, 40 less? I mean, I doubt we'll get to 40 less, to be honest, or more than that. So I just wanted to say it up front. I believe that there will be all sorts of silver linings brought out with regards to, well, it could be worse, and well, you know, you see, we're achieving something, and blah, 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 blah. It's like the teacher from Peanuts, from Charlie Brown. That's sometimes what it sounds like to me, because it's a whole pack of nonsense. You're saying, if. You say, if. And I do this very purposefully. I dare them to actually say the things that I'm cautioning them from saying effectively by this. If they want to tout, you know, slightly under 600 is some sort of improvement, I mean, I just have to ask, where are we going? What's going on? This will make sense. Generally speaking, once the murder rate crosses 300, things are horrible. You know, under 300 is still bad, but things are horrible. We doubled that last year. We're close to doubling that this year. Every one of those statistics, every one of those numbers counted is an individual life. And yes, some of them might be criminals up to no good, but at the end of the day, that is a result of a society that finds itself in a mess of its own making. Let's be real now. We don't have anybody else to blame but ourselves. Whether it is our society, our values, our morals, our policing, our authorities, the examples they set, our education system, the lack of two-parent homes, the lack of the village community, or you could throw whatever reason into the bucket you want. At the end of the day, there's no foreign power inciting violence. Yeah, there's transnational organized crime. But again, we allow it to come in. So I'm just saying, they might try to pass it off as some sort of silver lining. Will we accept that? I hope not. And maybe they don't. And I'll be happy if they don't. Again, there are a lot of things that I say on this show. I don't actually want to be right. Because if I'm right, then things are bad. I'd much rather be wrong. If somebody wants to be the smartest person in the room and be right all the time, be very wary of that person. Because if I am the smartest person in the room, then we're all in trouble because I ain't that smart. Anyway, so I'm just saying, look out for that. At the end of the year, be ready for that. Commissioner, Police Minister, National Security, Prime Minister, all of the good work being done, they'll spin the crime situation as positively as possible. But at the end of the day, each count in the murder rate was a life. And that is the product of our society, for better or worse. We can't divorce ourselves from that. All right, let's now actually go into today's daily review. And speaking about not being right, based on what has come down the pipe between yesterday and today, the theories that Karen and I spoke about yesterday, Maduro has an out, he's not actually going to try to annex Essequibo, that might actually end up being incorrect. Because the level of aggression now in his actions, while they're not necessarily outright invasions of military personnel and utilizing violence now, the implication is that it is right behind the steps that has already been taken. And what are those steps? Well, first of all, a military governor somehow has been appointed by the Venezuelan president over Essequibo. And foreign oil companies have been given a time limit of 3 months. They must vacate, and the Venezuelan authorities will be granting oil and gas licenses. And apparently the Venezuelan Assembly, is that's what it's called, the Venezuelan State Assembly? They are voting on the matter, and I think they may have even passed the matter. At this point, it's difficult to keep up with the nonsense. And I'm sorry, but to me it is nonsense, because at the end of the day, it's a dispute. You're not in possession of the disputed item. Your internal referendum cannot be interfered with by foreign powers because it's internal, but it grants no authority for legal claim over something that is technically within the possession of somebody else. Now, if their possession is not legal, you can't just have an internal referendum in order to make that of voters who, by the way, one, have been educated that Essequibo has always been part of Venezuela. Whether that's true or not does not matter. That's basically state propaganda as far as I'm concerned. That's an example of it, right? Two, who is going to dissent? We already see in TNT, a free democracy, people are unwilling to speak out about certain things because they are dependent on the government in whichever way, or they don't want to get involved. Not a lot of people actually have the cojones to stand up when it seems as though the entire system is potentially against you. And in Venezuela, it's potentially a much more stark circumstances. The potential penalties or consequences might be much more extreme or severe than what might be seen here. I think we all look back at situations where, dictators of history took over nations who otherwise would be normal, upright, good citizens, good neighbors, etc., etc. And we say, well, if we were there, we would have stood up for what's right. And we want to judge all of those who basically hid within the consensus of the crowd and didn't want to stand out and didn't want to risk their own neck because they didn't want to be the one lone voice in the wilderness. They didn't have the courage, and to some extent, they didn't even know how to do it without just dying needlessly. And And we like to think we would be the ones, but at the end of the day, in our own society, with less stakes on the line, too many people prove they ain't the ones. They're part of the pack, and if the pack go left, they go left, and if the pack go right, they go right. So much less for Venezuelans whose reality is not the same as us. Let's just put it that way. So am I supposed to take this referendum seriously? No, and it's an internal referendum. It's not binding to anybody external to Venezuela, regardless of whether it's said binding or not. There's also the case of a missing Guyanese helicopter, GDF helicopter. Again, don't want to speculate on the reasons why it's missing, because helicopters have gone missing before for less nefarious reasons, right? But at the end of the day, it does not help the situation because tensions are on the rise. And I would argue that what the Venezuelan president has said is borderline an act of war. Because now he's made claims over authority of the region. The question is, will he try to enforce those claims? And it doesn't necessarily have to be military powers used to enforce those claims, military violence, although it was a general who was made, I believe, as a military governor of Essequibo. But, you know, if he attempts to put in Venezuelan personnel in the region to exert authority, well then, even if they're not soldiers, that to me is more or less an act of war, because it's foreign agents acting outside of the scope of law in the region. And it's not as though the people in Essequibo want to be part of Venezuela. Even if Venezuelans in Essequibo don't want to be part of Venezuela. It's interesting what might be said when you're not censored in your speech. The truth might actually come out. Maybe. Maybe that's the truth, maybe it's not. Right? Of course, some people want to stick their nose where it doesn't belong, apparently wants to, you know, drink all of the Venezuelan Kool-Aid, hot crack and single. Some of the locals here. By some, I mean one in particular, but he knows who he is. Anyway, that's why his protest actually never amount to anything. Then Venezuela goes on and has the gall to say that Guyana potentially asking for the United States to deploy troops into Essequibo is reckless. And generally speaking, this is how dictators go. They do reckless things, but then what they do is never reckless. But what the response that they get for their reckless decisions is decried by whatever speech, which ironically usually makes them out to be very hypocritical, because it's almost like if they're projecting themselves on their opponents. Now, at the end of the day, what does that mean for us? First of all, it does mean that any window that we had to try to mediate, and this is the point I tried to make yesterday, neither side is going to accept mediation. There's no compromise on this issue. There's one thing, both sides want it, right? And now the question is, who has the best claim? I don't even know if you could say who has the proper claim, right? That's all for lawyers to sort out. And one could say, ooh, lawyers are corrupt, whatever, whatever. Let's be real. You really think that the Venezuelan government isn't corrupt? Like, really? Let's just be honest here. I know a lot of people hate America, but at any day, if things go south, literally, well, rhetorically, who do you think we call in to save our bacon so that we don't get caught up in the mess? Let's be real. Let's be very real. All of the nice rhetoric about anti-Western sentiments and colonialism and whatever, whatever, blah, 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 blah. We don't want to rely on those jokers to help us in anything. $1 trillion plus of Belt and Road debts defaulted on China. I wonder why. So, we have to be concerned about this. It's our neighbor. Tensions are escalating. I still think there's room, or rather there's a good possibility that it will not reach to violence. I still think that. But that's why I say the Venezuelan government's actions are reckless. Sanctions were just lifted. What do they expect is going to happen? Is the international community just going to take their referendum results as, you know, the be-all and end-all of this matter and let it go? I don't think so. In fact, Venezuela seems to be unable to manage their own oil and gas resources that they currently have anyway. So on what grounds could they justifiably say we will handle more resources with the capacity to distribute them to the world efficiently? Huh? Nah. And then now the question is, when you give somebody an inch, they eventually take a mile. That's human nature, right? I think while the possibility is small, no pun intended on my name, at the end of the day, we need to be concerned about the fact that if they could annex parts of Guyana, at what point do they look at if the rest of the world does not respond strongly enough, do they start to look at Trinidad and Tobago? Why not? Why not? I mean, it's even more impractical, it's even more reckless, and there's even less justification. But still, crazier things have happened throughout history. And I have reached the point where I am starting to think that the Venezuelan government is complete and utter. Well, they're either morons or they're crazy. Based on the recklessness of their actions and the timing of the recklessness. So let's just say they're not those two things. Again, that's arguments that this is not going to escalate further, hopefully. That's why I still think that they're not entirely dumb and they're not entirely crazy. They're just maybe taking a little bit of a gamble. To what end, though, remains to be seen. And that's the problem. Without being able to answer that question, that's where this part of my arguments falls short. But then, if that's the case, the counter is they are going to invade. And what are we going to do about it? And I say, hey, if Guyana wants America to come in and establish a base in Essequibo, I'm all for that too. I am all for that too. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to say, oh, America only moves for the oil. Yes, so does everybody else. So does everybody else. Why do you think there's so much diplomatic competition over little old TNT and we barely have anything left? And then, of course, the soul of our nation and history will judge us on our own decisions. So now let's see, depending on how far this goes, if our own self-centered need for survival and our one-track strategy will continue regardless of the consequences for the Caribbean community. History will judge us. Hell, depending on how things turn out, we might judge ourselves. It's easy to throw blame on the people that came before us. That's a reminder to the current government. You won't be here forever. You can't control the narrative when you're gone. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish up the daily review. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point HD WSN. We'll be right back.
Naturally to us, unstoppable energy. We use it to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drum heads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations. 6 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Chaguanas, C3 Center Branch, Christmas Store at C3 San Fernando, and Eastgate Mall, Trin City. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Welcome back to Talking Point, everyone. And moving on to the next story in the Daily Review, have to do a quick roundup. So to start off again, the $20 million settlement. 9 accused in the Naipaul Kuhlman case. They sued the state. I believe it was for wrongful prosecution, and they were awarded $2 million plus each. And that judgment has been set aside after arguments made by the Attorney General. Basically, it's over the procedure of how everything went down and why the state did not offer up any defense. Basically, what the state is saying, that the official office and those who are officially designated to receive such paperwork, they didn't get the notifications. So the default judgment is not necessarily reasonable because the process wasn't handled properly. And then on top of that, it wasn't as though the defendant's case was so strong, right? That so there's merits of actually going through the process and the state presenting a defense. Now, the plaintiffs, I guess you could say, right? They're not the defendants anymore, they're the plaintiffs. They have filed an appeal basically saying, well, look, generally speaking, this is how things were done with regards to lawsuits against the states in the past, and this ruling potentially might undermine a whole host of cases, not just this one, right? The state, on the other hand, is saying, well, look, at the end of the day, it also potentially could undermine the state's position if this precedent is allowed to stand, because at some point, you can't arrest anybody and charge them with anything, regardless of how good the evidence is, if, you know, it's just going to be an automatic, oh, but we could sue you afterwards once we get acquitted. Now, a not guilty verdict does not mean innocent, by the way. Not necessarily. It just means that we don't have enough to find you guilty. But the evidence might still be reasonable enough to charge, in which case there's nothing wrong done by the state there to charge you, to put you on trial, to potentially arrest you. Now, the issue, though, that I have is that it seems as though This is in part, now to what degree depends, right? And I don't know if we'll have the public on the outside looking in will have enough detailed information to make that determination. But it seems in part the fault is in the hands of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs and how that body is run. Because after the file went missing, it was disappeared. Potentially, according to the AG, he did not necessarily want to say, it was intentionally disappeared. Now, a whole report was done on that, and that report was delivered, I believe, like June this year. I can't remember. But the important point is that the two people that did that investigation, Judge Stanley John and retired ACP Pamela Schulera-Hines, they delivered their report in June, 60-page final report, and they made recommendations, which includes, because this was said to the press, a complete restructuring of the civil law department. This case, while the murder trial was criminal, the lawsuit was civil. They were suing the state, right? It was not a criminal matter to sue the state. So, a complete restructuring of the civil law department, I believe, because now there are questions with regards to how that department is handling, most likely, situations like this, when people sue the state for whatever reason. And then we do have to ask, to some extent, is part of the reasons why the state loses so many cases with regards to people that were arrested or imprisoned and they have various grievances. Is it in part because this aspect of the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs doesn't have its affairs in order? Now, to be fair to them, what part of our government bureaucracy does have its affairs in order and is operating reasonably good enough? They don't have to be a well-oiled machine. They don't have to be the next coming of the championship. But they do have to, be reasonably good enough. It is, after all, an important function. We're not talking about somebody's hardware store or somebody's pharmacy or somebody's chicken stand. We're talking about a government office, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Civil Law Department. So that's interesting because they made those recommendations. And then, of course, based on those recommendations, one must wonder to what extent do the plaintiffs still have a good case and, hey, it's not our fault. You dropped the ball for yourself. That's your fault, right? If those were the rules of the day. On the other hand, it might set precedent that's just too untenable. And the question is, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not any legal professional. To what extent will the legal system be able to handle that? I have no idea. So this case is not just about the dollars and cents, it's also, for all intents and purposes, the common law that it's potentially going to set, as well as the accountability that needs to be asked with regards to this specific department, the civil law department, and then the implications of other government offices, etc., etc. All right. Said I had to move fast, and that is definitely not fast. So, next story. Within the realm of law, again, so you may have heard about the businesswoman. Her sex toys were seized by customs, and they have been returned. And I believe they weren't necessarily returned all at once. They were returned in batches. At least some items were still retained because they were deemed obscene, and then eventually they too were returned. I will not say what they are on air. Needless to say, the businesswoman is continuing her lawsuit because I believe she is, to some extent, she is frustrated and wants to prevent future incidents of arbitrary customs rulings. Ooh, we're going to keep this. Ooh, we're going to keep that. And I will give it to you. She wants to prevent that from happening in the future. And I get it. I understand. Because to me, it seems as though customs also does not have its act in order. And we're not talking about some small, minor functionary here. And we're not talking about something that's going to cost the state money, so they have an incentive to get it right. We're talking about something that potentially is treating citizens unfairly, and dare I say, potentially even charging citizens to some extent unfairly. Now, the details of that is left up to speculation, but too many people have questions with regards to the transparency of how customs does its job. Why customs is too slow? Why do they charge people so much, especially for certain things which, at the end of the day, it's almost like if customs doesn't even know what it is, they just want to charge because they think it's expensive or they could get away with charging a lot. And now I have to ask, will the Revenue Authority do a better job? I don't know. But I say yes, go ahead with your lawsuits, because at the end of the day, it seems as though the only time certain aspects of our government bureaucracy, so this is not the elected officials, but they're involved to some extent, the only time they're going to pay attention is if we sue. And while I don't necessarily want to see TNT turn into such a litigious society that we'll sue over hot coffee spilled in McDonald's, you know, if we have to get to that point, so at least we'll have some amount of accountability and transparency, fine. Fine. Last story that I'll touch on in this segment. The NTA has now more or less announced, you know, that they plan to contest all 41 seats in the next general election. That's all well and good. The situation does make me wonder, though. It does make me wonder. Let's just go back to the crime talks a little bit and what the Prime Minister said. All of this stuff in this report that, I think it was Stanley John again, that he decided to give me as the head of the National Security Council because he found it was so bad and we had to do something about it, blah, blah, blah. That's all well and good. And he's blocking me from laying it out in Parliament where my speech is privileged and I can't be held accountable for whatever I say. But as the former soldier pointed out, the former backbencher is free to make his claims outside of Parliament. And I would question the fact that if the situation was so serious, if the former backbencher had so much important information about the former soldier, then maybe he might do something if it was relevant enough, if it was significant enough to prevent him from participating in elections. Because the last thing a nation needs is someone who is potentially guilty of some sort of criminal corruption to still be allowed to go up for elections and enter into government. Right? That's the theory. The reality is something a lot more complex and practical and not so simple to just follow through with, because I don't think the Prime Minister has enough to do anything about the former soldier Gary Griffith. In which case, he needs to stop harping about it because it's getting ridiculous. You either have a smoking gun or you don't. You either have something substantial or you don't. I ain't no big fan of Gary Griffith, let's be real. I at times have questioned his spin on his own career as Commissioner of Police. I have appreciated where I think he did good things, and I have lamented where I think he did bad things. Is he the answer to our crime situation right now? I don't think so. But in part because I don't think he is all that people believe to be, although he can be effective in certain ways, and I've said that before, don't get me wrong, but he ain't the second coming of the Savior. But there's also the fact that the issues are greater than just the TTPS, and the Commissioner alone can't solve all of them. Especially when you have questions on the independence of the Police Service Commission, and you have nonsensical political maneuvering like what we saw out of the Prime Minister. The ridiculousness of the whole situation, when you think about it, is the fact that all of that drama happened for no reason because they had to go through the damn process a second time around as it was supposed to be done. And it makes the whole situation with withdrawing the merit list ludicrously nonsensically redundant and unnecessary. And that's the depth of political strategy we have. So I just, if he's so bad, but he could still run for office, you could have crime talks with the man. Because he actually has to have done something. The standard is innocent until proven guilty, whether we like it or not. And there will always be cases that we don't like it. There'll be always cases where we want to take the quick and easy route and just condemn somebody prematurely, whether they actually did it or not. We don't care. We'll take the risk of condemning an innocent man because we want quick justice and we want the easy route. And that temptation, once you go down that slippery slope, again, you give people an inch, they'll take a mile. That's just human nature. Is that something that we want to start? We want to start that snowball rolling downhill? Because it's going to continue and pick up speed and eventually going to grow out of control. And then we're not going to be able to stop it until something bad happens. And then what are you going to say? Oops. You can't do anything about it. Well, then get off of it. Because you're just making yourself look worse over harping on an issue that you are essentially incapable of doing anything about. Well, then one must ask, to some extent, then, is there really a reasonable issue? And in fact, the irony of the situation is, yes, but they potentially can be. But again, what is the standard? Innocent until proven guilty. Not implicated by my indirect speech in public. That's because if it happened to you, you would not like it, right? All right, let's take a break. Hopefully we'll get this here and we'll continue our conversations on Talking Point this morning. Stay tuned.
The following is a paid political announcement.
Join us for the live broadcast on Saturday, December 9th as we kick off the much anticipated HOPE launch event, the ultimate celebration of transparent governance. Get ready to immerse yourself in the unveiling of our visionary roadmap for this great nation. Tune in from 2 p.m. to hear from the dedicated members of HOPE, spearheaded by the dynamic Timothy Hamill-Smith, as they share their commitment to serving the people and the country right here on WESN, Content Capital. Saturday, December 9th, 2023, this live broadcast and event starts at 2 p.m. and is coming to viewers from Paria Suites Conference Center, La Romaine. Join us in embracing the core values of hope, honesty, opportunity, performance, empowerment. Be a part of the movement for a brighter and more transparent future.
The preceding was a paid political announcement. Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations. 6 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Chaguanas, C3 Center Branch, Christmas Store at C3 San Fernando, and Eastgate Mall, Trin City. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
From the sacred hallowed halls of the St. Joseph's Convent Chapel, this December 9th and 10th, join us for an evening of enchanting melodies and timeless tradition at Carols at the Convent, under the direction of John Thomas and Cecilia Salazar. Be captivated by the awe-inspiring performances of the award-winning St. Joseph's Convent Choir, Port of Spain, alongside their esteemed special guests. Tickets are $200 and are available at select outlets: St. Joseph's Convent Office, the Abercrombie Tea Shop, the Living Water Bookshop, and Kitchen Corner along Circular Mall, or call 625-4502 for more information. Don't miss this musical masterpiece where every note resonates with the spirit of the season. Carols at the Convent. Get your tickets today.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide: Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And I am joined once again by the PRO of the UNC, Dr. Kirk Mayhew. Dr. Mayhew, thank you for joining me once again on Talking Points.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, Dr. Mayhew, I don't know if you know, but we've had some other discussions on Talking Point with regards to the social fabric of the nation and the impact things like marijuana has on it. And then the opposition leader came out with a different topic that I think has a similar type of debate. And she has basically called out that we have a pornography epidemic and exploitive over-sexualization of children. And perhaps one could even to kind of better summarize it, or to add to that, to say an over-secularization of many things in our society. You know, forms of entertainment, and part of it is due to, of course, the digital age that we find ourselves in. Part of it also, it seems as though, and we also spoke about other aspects of child abuse with regards to the pandemic and children being stuck on devices, but also they're at home where it's easier for things to be kept private and to be kept from the wider society. Now, just to start off the conversation here, to what extent is the opposition leader potentially speaking about this problem, and what is it that she is hoping to see done about this issue?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the first instance, what she wants to do is to get all interested parties to actually talk about the issue, and because many people have thought about it. I think every parent must have thought about it. As a parent myself, certainly in raising, you know, my own son and whatnot, and let me tell you, I was glad I had a son, because looking at the way little girls are targeted by, let's say, cable companies, because let's start off with the international culture as well, right? So the things you see on Disney, on Nickelodeon, the way they sexualize young girls in particular from such an early age is, I just think it is totally inappropriate. And but even with with young boys, at least you don't have that side of it. I think it's even harder raising girls, but yeah, and then you have the ready availability of pornography on the internet, and it's almost impossible to censor anything. I mean, yes, there are parental controls and things you could get, but after a certain age, it's almost you have to let your children run free in this wild space where they have access to anything. So I mean, I think every parent has to have thought about that and confronted that. But every social worker, every people who are in charge of the media, because for those that did not read the statement, she called. I mean, the call to action in her release was that I therefore call, meaning the leader of opposition, calls on the government, on civil society, on the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the Media Association, and any willing stakeholder to come together with the UNC to begin discussions on social, legislative, and educational interventions to address the pornography epidemic and the exploitative over-sexualization of children. What we want is a discussion with stakeholders, people who have thought about this, people who have had to deal with it, and let's be more systematic about this, because it almost seems like there's an organized assault on our children, because this is what motivated this call in the first place. When we saw the reports of 2,000 girls and 500 boys being sexually abused, being reported by the Children's Authority in 2020 to 2021. We have to do something. A lot of times you say, oh, it's just the culture, this is just the way it is. We can't just throw up our hands like that. If there's a problem like this, we need to try to do something. And the first step is to talk about what possibly can we do, educationally, legislatively, social programs, these sorts of things. So that's the first thing. We want a dialogue.
Well, child abuse in general, not just sexual abuse, is up. Reports made to the Children's Authority, and one of the key things in TNT is it's the reports that were made. That's not an indication of the total figure. Even the murder rates, one has to ask, is that the total figure? Definitely for other crimes, especially crimes where people tend to be hesitant to make reports. So there is that context where, to what extent now is it not a specific issue, but a general one with regards to abuse against minors? But then I do have to ask now, is it that the opposition is saying we believe that pornography is directly tied to sexual abuse of minors? And that is to say, not just the exposure that minors have to pornography, but also the viewing of pornography by adults and the over-sexualization of adult society. Is that having an impact with regards to then how we treat minors, or the minors potentially seeing the examples and making, poor decisions themselves? I understand that they're minors, but you get what I'm saying. Bad influence of setting the wrong example or allowing them to see things that are not meant for them to be seen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so there's the aspect of the children, and you're right. There is the adult aspect too. I remember, I don't know if there are any recent statistics now, but I have seen statistics on the internet showing that Trinidad and Tobago has been ranked as either the #1 or very high in the world, viewership of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
That there is that Trinidad and Tobago has this, dubiously high ranking in that area, and this type of addiction is there are many studies about the problem of pornography addiction, right? When you're #1 in the world for, sadly, we're #6 in the world with murders and #1 with pornography viewing. This type of thing then goes beyond something, I don't know, casual or it's problematic. It must, and there are many studies showing how, in terms of relationships, and I have to say, locally, my own view, and this may be unpopular with many people, but our own carnival culture, for example, but not only carnival, our fetting culture, our fetting and dancing culture, let's say, and musical culture is also very sexual, and there are many times when even in school, like, let's say, my own son sometimes, and I would see and hear songs and dancing that I think are totally inappropriate for primary school children being promoted, and adults, engaging in this type of behavior in front of children and normalizing it. And when pornography becomes so ubiquitous and so normalized, many adults lose their sense of boundary as to what is appropriate in what context, and then when adults lose that perspective in front of children, it becomes worse. And when children get sucked into that whole sexualized environment, then it becomes doubly worse. Because yes, the problem with adults is bad, but when it really spills over onto the children, then it really calls for intervention. And this appears to be what's happening.
So I do have to ask, now, is there any ideas on the table for what intervention might look like? Because the obvious thing in cases like this, generally speaking, whether they're very similar or very, not that similar, but within the realm of the similarities of the types of arguments, the first thing that you look at is censorship. And you said it yourself. Now, I think you were potentially referring to trying to partially or to control specifics on censorship is not so simple. And that therein lies the issue with trying to censor certain things from children. It's difficult depending on how much they know of how to maneuver around the internet and maneuver around websites just in general. But that leads to the usual consideration given to, well, let's just ban everything. And of course, that kind of oversimplifies what does that mean, ban everything. And then, of course, at some point, you ban so much that you start to ban other things indirectly. So is that on the horizon? You also mentioned potential for legislative steps being taken place. What is on the table? Because I think public support would be dependent on what is being proposed.
Yeah, and then this is why we want conversation. I mean, definitely there are people in society who believe that things should be much more censored. But as you say, sometimes censorship can be too extreme, or adults do have the right to view things, and read and listen and watch things they want, within a degree of responsibility. So these types of things have to be looked at. I mean, from my own experience around the world, there are very interesting models in different places. Like I remember, like in the UK, for example, they used to have a 9 o'clock. I think they still do, a 9 o'clock cutoff time on the television, for example, where before 9 o'clock there were certain standards in place, and then after 9 o'clock the standards were loosened, and so there's and in any case, the United States used to have and I think they still do, have a code as to what can be shown on TV and what cannot be shown on TV, right? On public TV, as opposed to subscription-based TV, right? So in the United States channel, what can be shown on ABC or NBC is not what can be shown on HBO or Cinemax. They have different standards. So there is that level of regulation. And then, of course, you have more extreme places like in China, where you can't even get Facebook, or you can't get Western, Twitter or YouTube or whatnot. So they have almost their own internet. And then you have places like Singapore, which are very, very, very heavily, policed on the internet and so forth. Just like the whole society is a very heavily policed society in that way. I don't think that that is really the way for us, but I don't know what is. This is why the leader called for TAT, the Telecommunication Authority, because we do have regulations in place, and I don't think that they are enforced in all sorts of things, in sexualization matters. Also, some discussions you hear on some radio stations and so forth, I think are very inciting in terms of racial discourse, violence discourse. Sometimes some people are allowed to get away with things that are in clear violation. So we need to be clear about that. What can TAT do? What are the rules? And we need to perhaps enforce them more rigorously. But I think in my own understanding and view, censorship is not necessarily the first option, but regulation as to what is appropriate, when and where. I think that certainly must be on the table for discussion, and to see what can be practical and necessary.
And potentially there's a lot of regulations, as you just pointed out, if they're not enforced, that we could just start to enforce them consistently, I guess you could say. Is that really part of the problem there, like just the inconsistency of the whole situation?
I think so. I mean, and that goes across the board in almost everything in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have excellent laws on paper and excellent regulations on paper for almost everything, but it's just not enforced, and not enforced consistently, as you say. Sometimes, people, it's enforced very conveniently, in all sorts of things. Cursing in public, for example, this type of thing. Yeah.
Well, but the flip side of that is I do have to ask, because with regards to the other topic we spoke about this week, that deals with that sort of moral decay of society, or the potential of, the perception of. I understand people have concerns about marijuana. I think to some extent alcohol has a similar set of negative consequences. We were able to regulate that, you know. I think the situation over marijuana needs to be adapted, changed, evolved, whatever, right? The status quo is not necessarily the best right now. But in both situations, though, whenever we have a moral decay sort of argument, I do have to ask, at some point, do we just have to say, look, yeah, we could try to protect and regulate it with regards to children, but at some point, the underlying aspects of society that exists, people need to have the freedom to choose for themselves whether to do it or to not, to participate or to not, whether it's carnival, watching pornography, and even, you know, more things, more activities during nighttime of ill repute at places of ill repute, right? That is the hallmark of a free society, to allow certain things, you know, you're not harming me, I'm not harming you. So kids need to be protected, obviously, they're impressionable. But we just have to maybe let certain things go. Yeah, if we're number one porn downloads or porn viewing or whatever in the world, that might just be something we have to bite that bullet and say, well, yeah, we are. You know, we can't really stop people from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that whole debate about freedom, free will, and so forth is you know, very important to take a look at. I mean, there's so many great pieces of literature and art that speak about that, you know, whether it be something dystopian like George Orwell's 1984, or I don't know if you're familiar with A Clockwork Orange, you know, it raises these questions. Are we really free if we don't have choice? You know, religious you know, theology also looks at that too, the choice of free will, you know, that God gave us free will in order that we choose to do good, because you can only do good when you choose to do good, not when you're forced to do good, you know. So there are these questions, you know, that really also need to be looked at, and I do think, you know, I do think as an adult, I mean, and as adults, we need to be able to exercise our choice. But you know, that this also goes back to the healthiness of society, and our own moral and spiritual health at individual levels. Because when you yourself, as an individual, you know, perhaps have degree, you know, are not, you know, morally and spiritually fit. Let's put it that way, or as a society, then you obviously are not going to make the right choices in that sense, and that could be extremely problematic. You know, societies do decay, societies do implode, and we have to have we have to have an emphasis on ethics, on values, on morality, on spirituality, and you know, these are also, it's also suggested in the leader's statement where she talked about, you know, social interventions and civil society organizations and educational interventions, because, you know, sometimes people, you know, in order to make a good choice for yourself, you have to be properly educated, and I think that you know, with freedom comes responsibility as well. And so I myself, I'm not partial to, you know, a censorship regime or whatnot. But on the other hand, I do think there is, you know, appropriateness, that people shouldn't simply be free to do anything they want, anywhere they want. You know, sometimes you see things in, let's say, the United States, for example, that are, you know, you know, the society in certain aspects seem to be degenerating morally so much. Things that you see in public, you know, you only see that when you know, it's only when I used to read about the decadence of the Roman Empire and the fall of that society, I'm saying, oh my God, it's like we're living through that now, you know. So yeah, I think that there has to be this balance. We do need the freedom, but we also need to be morally and spiritually fit persons, individuals, and society as well, to lead a wholesome, productive, and happy life. Because I do think making a lot of these, you know, bad choices really does degrade one's own individual life and also social life. So there is this kind of balance, and that was reflected in the leader statement, that we need something holistic, and it's not just about legislation, it's about education, about social interventions as well.
I do find that interesting, because I also had a similar thought, that I was wondering, it seems almost as though certain issues, certain big issues in America is of their own making. It's not anybody else's. It's not a natural disaster. It's literally just we disagree on things that are not going to change the price of bread, but for whatever reason we believe so strongly about it. And I thought, yeah, this seems like how the Roman Empire went down. It wasn't that, yes, there was eventually the barbarians at the gate and all of that jazz, but they were weakened by their own, we just have problems of our own making. It's not a storm, it's not famine, it's not a plague, it's just we can't agree with each other, and our society breaks down. Now, with that, I want to add to the point that you were making about education, because I do have to ask, and one can say the same thing about marijuana usage about young teens as well. Even alcohol usage amongst teens as well, maybe not so much young teens, but let's be real, generally speaking, alcohol usage between 16, 17-year-olds, maybe even 15-year-olds is not that small or as we think, or as we would hope, or as it should be based on the laws of society. And could it just come down to, we need to really rethink how our young people are educated over issues and how to act responsibly. It's not just a matter of telling them what not to do, but trying to figure out a way. Not every method works for every child, but right now we basically have one method, to generalize, and it doesn't seem to be working for every child. And we need to have a more holistic approach in the sense of not just education, but also a more holistic within education of trying to find all these various ways to reach out to the different personalities and mentalities of children. Because at the end of the day, it's fine if we could tell them don't do something and we could enforce it. But if we don't teach them why to make good decisions and how, then when they become adults and they're left to their own devices, it's just going to fall apart.
I totally agree with you. And I would add one thing to your list of if we don't teach them why and how. And if we ourselves don't set the examples. Last time I was on, we talked about that with violence in Tobago. I mean, if as adults, I remember my father, telling me not to smoke a cigarette while he's smoking a cigarette. I remember that example, and that happens, quite a bit, don't drink, and you have a drink in your hands. You're telling the child, but we have to set the examples ourselves as adults. And so, and we need more public education on a lot of things, I remember some years ago on TV here in Trinidad, on local TV, there used to be ads about bad driving, for example, and they used to show they used to have real videos of bad drivers, people, and I thought that was so good. I used to really like that because there's so much bad driving on the road. When I go to a roundabout. And I see, boy, people don't know how to properly drive in this roundabout. There should be some more public education, but even on things that's like that. But then when you take it into these aspects of alcohol, marijuana, and one of the things I want to restate, one of the things that the leader, Kamala Prasad-Bisesha, said about the legalization of marijuana, that is extremely unfortunate or a bad thing, is not necessarily the legal of marijuana itself, but the fact that it's totally unregulated. Where are the stores we can, it's legal, but where are the stores that you can buy this? Where's the regulations? What are the standards? So it's legal, but we don't have regulated dispensaries. So what? So people just go back on the same block where they used to buy it when it was illegal, and so then they're buying it from the same people, and then without this regulation, they lace it with cocaine. Then there are all different strains of marijuana now, that are extremely potent because I don't know if they genetically modify it, but they certainly selectively breed it so that the THC levels become higher and higher, and it becomes some strains are almost like hard drugs, and it can't be considered a soft drug. So there needs to be it's just like with alcohol, you have punching and then you have wine, or beer. There's different levels. And the marijuana grades have been highly intensified, and there's no regulation on this, none. And so there's no safe regulated place to buy it, and there's no regulation about the product itself. So that's something where the government really fell down on. What they said, you could grow it in your home, and so what they expect people to grow it in their home and smoke what they grow. Is that what was envisaged? That can't be right. What they're doing is they're enabling the people on the drug blocks. Still, that's not what was supposed to happen.
Well, let me just pause there, just so I could announce formally that we're opening up the phone lines so that viewers could call in. There's some follow-up to this, but just so people could aware, please call in. It's fine to interrupt us if you have something else that you want to speak about. If you want to talk about with regards to pornography and TNT, if you want to, I don't know how much our locals might have more opinions on what's going on in Venezuela, between Venezuela and Guyana, but the new rounds of increased tension, if you want to speak about that, or any other topic, of course, we have the judgment set aside in the Naipaul Kuman case. We have the situation with adult toys and customs and that whole lawsuit there as well. But Dr. Mayu, back on this topic there, let me just give you a summary of my position, and you could tell me if you agree with me or not on marijuana. What we have is a compromise that doesn't really do anything well, and I think we either should just go back to making it completely illegal, or, as you say, fully regulated, properly open it up, have legal dispensaries, not just to control it better and regulate it better and to try to cut out the illegal trade, which seems to be thriving, right? You could grow it in your own home, but people are still buying it illegally. But also so that it's above board, we could tax it. Alcohol is taxed, tobacco is taxed. This is not a stretch of the imagination to say that marijuana should be taxed.
Yeah, and I don't think people know that marijuana used to be legal in Trinidad. I'm trying to remember the year it was made illegal. I think it's in the 1950s at some point. And it used to be called ganja, right? In fact, my great grandfather and his father used to sell ganja legally in Princestown in their shop. I think it was called the Blue Parrot shop. And because it was part of Hindu rituals and so forth, and that's actually how it became part of Rastafarianism. Even the whole terminology, the chillum, ganja is a Hindi word, chillum, the pipe is a Hindi word, the meditation that's involved in it, and all sorts of things. I mean, my grandfather and my father would tell me stories of how, in Princestown they used to sit in the back. The men used to take the marijuana and they used to sing songs the whole night. And I think that probably the banning of alcohol, the banning of ganja probably led to alcohol replacing it in those situations, which is actually much worse because you don't get into a meditative state with alcohol. But there were signs. I remember people telling me about this. I actually have not seen it before, but people told me there were signs, just like you see, license to sell alcohol, license to sell ganja. Right? And I actually looked at, so it was licensed, and I looked up some of the legal legislation, and there was a, I can't remember what it was called, like a ganja depot or something like that. But the whole distribution and whatnot was regulated, because and that was in the colonial days. Right? But then it was sometime in the 40s or 50s. It was banned and then became illegal. So in the past, it was regulated. There was legislation surrounding ganja, and it was called ganja at the time. And so there's no reason why it can't be done today. It's actually not a new thing, and I totally agree. And this is what we've called for. Regulating it, a much more stringently, having these dispensaries. And yes, if we tax alcohol, because in the States, maybe some people may not be aware of this. In the United States, they banned alcohol outright for many years, right? And you couldn't get, and alcohol was an illegal drug. I was going to say, like cocaine and marijuana, but those things are so available in America, you wouldn't even know it's illegal sometimes. And people openly talk about it, consuming it. But at that time, you couldn't have alcohol anywhere. And that is why you had the gangsters like Al Capone and so forth, because alcohol was illegal. And so and people were consuming it. And so you had all these gang wars about alcohol. And when they legalized the alcohol and regulated it, that aspect stopped. They moved to other drugs, but the gang warfare that infected America because of the ban of alcohol was stopped when it was properly regulated and so forth. So we have not properly regulated our marijuana, distribution and sale, and so it's not stopped the gang warfare. So so it is tied to the crime as well. So we do need to, and I agree, we need to properly regulate it, and this is what the leader called for, and even reviewing the age, because,
Are there any concerns? Because, okay, we brought up pornography with regards to children. One of my callers is very vehement about it. Some of the other callers, well, hold on that. We do have a call from Shogunas. Good morning, caller, you on here?
Good day, gentlemen.
Morning.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
I'm getting you very...
Oh, connectivity issues again. Caller, just talk.
Okay, right. I have seen nowhere where when they had the arbitration result, that Venezuela objected to it at that time. It took 50 years or more. Secondly, the arbitration covered more than the Essequibo River. The additional area it covered went to Venezuela, which they occupied up to today. They never occupied this piece. Why it is there is no significant Venezuelan occupation of the Essequibo that is supportive of Venezuela. And these things, the government of Guyana should be put in a logical manner, instead of having a little piece here and a little piece there. Any questions, gentlemen?
I don't think so. I don't know if you could just repeat the last thing that you said there for me.
The last thing?
Yeah.
What I said, that the government of Guyana should be documenting these things logically and having it. You see that little piece in different places all
right,
about.
Right. Thank you with that. Yes. No questions to add. I think generally speaking, it's some good points raised. I myself, it's just one of those things where, it becomes the Hatfield and McCoys, could you remember the origin of all of this? To what extent will you reference?
If I can intervene here.
Sure.
There was an excellent article that was published in the Express and maybe other places as well, because it was by Kit Nascimento, who was an advisor to Irfan Ali. And he may have actually been a PNC minister, if I'm not mistaken, but now advising the PPP government in Guyana, so across political lines. And he outlines the entire history of that dispute so clearly and so well. I'm surprised it wasn't spread more widely, because it talks about the very things that the caller is talking about, and then even why and how this claim, which was settled way back in 1899, got revived in the 1940s, and he named the American diplomat that was involved in it, and it was about overthrowing the Chetty Jagan regime and destabilizing it, right? So because they didn't want Chetty Jagan because he was a Marxist to be prime minister of Guyana,
right?
And they overthrew his government twice because of that. The British and the Americans did that twice. And so it is tied to that, and it's very interesting that this person Kit Nascimento, who I believe is a PNC, who was originally PNC, should say that because the PNC would have been the beneficiary of that overthrow of Jagan's government, and yeah, so there is a very, very clear timeline with and he refers to the documents that initially revised invented that claim over the Essequibo, because it was not there in 1899. So I highly recommend that. I think it's the clearest, and it becomes very obvious. So as the caller said, when you put the facts on the table, it's very clear and obvious that the claim that Venezuela has now is absolutely arbitrary and not grounded in any agreements or legitimate claims from the past. This is just really a land grab they are making out of thin air.
Let me just ask for your opinion on this, because yesterday, Karen Escher and I, we were looking at the fact that the referendum was not binding. And generally speaking, I found the timing of all of this, when the saber rattling started in earnest, to be very suspicious, because you just got sanctions lifted by the United States, right? We ourselves got the ability to now pay cash to compensate Venezuela for our part of the Dragon deal, etc., etc. And they're going to do this now. So all of these things pointed to the fact that maybe this was just Maduro needed an external issue to point at, to rally the population behind, because he has to deal with a situation where he might not be able to rig the next election, if he rigs elections, to the same extent that he did in the past, because there's more scrutiny now when he wants the sanctions lifted. However, of course, as we've seen in the last 24 hours, tensions have risen and things have escalated, not to the point of open hostility. Do you think that this is just a political play to kind of, distract people so that he could, cement his internal support? Or is this a serious thing and they're really going to try to weasel their way to get Essequibo out from Guyana?
There are probably elements of both in it, and definitely Kamala Prasad-Bissessar on Monday outlined that we've seen this before. She's seen this before when she was prime minister. There was a claim made, either 2015, I think it was in 2015, about the Essequibo again, and she stood clearly with Guyana, and she showed the picture of her and then President Granger standing side by side standing up against, I believe it was, Maduro was in 2015. I think he was in 2015.
Yes, he might have been.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So standing up against Maduro's claim then, and as she noted then, that was driven by elections, because there were elections due in a few months, and so they raised this thing because in many militarily aggressive societies, militarily strong societies, to raise nationalism and patriotism, you ring the bell of war. That's like when the United States invaded Grenada in 1983, right? Ronald Reagan, did that because the Americans were humiliated over Vietnam ever since 1967, well, 75 when they pulled out, but since the 60s and 70s, and America lost its confidence and so forth, and invading Grenada, whipped up sentiment at home that, that they could invade this and overthrow the government of this small island. But that, that was a real boon for Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, just like when Thatcher and the Falkland Islands, and whatnot. So Maduro and Essequibo, there's definitely seems to be a pattern that we see, that they raise this claim to to rally people to be patriotic and support the regime, and the aggressive military regime. So there definitely seems that there's that about it, and Kamala Prasad-Bissessar outlined it very clearly and very well on Monday night. But I also think that there is a desire for the mineral wealth. But let's put that in a little context. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world already, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Kuwait, Qatar, all these countries, and yet it is one of the poorest countries in the world. People they don't have diapers, food, basic necessities. That is mind-boggling.
They come here.
Yes,
at least not too long ago they were coming here in so much numbers that it was starting to become an issue with how much we could actually absorb without having now further consequences, in part to the migrants coming here. So
exactly,
it's. I do hope though that it won't come to any sort of violence, because I'm not sure if the region is ready to deal with that. Even if we have America to back us up, there's still going to be a lot of complexities with regards to our own situation. Crime might be further out of control as the region destabilizes, is one thing that comes to mind. But Dr. Mayhew, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to have conversations with you. We didn't have much calls in today's call-in segment, but we did have a good discussion on many things.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I look forward to it again.
And of course, thank you, Professor, for calling in. Folks, this is Talking Point here on WESN. It's a good day to have a good day, as my co-host always says, but we have to start today. We can't wait on someone to save us from ourselves. Folks, stay safe. We will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
The following is a paid political announcement.
Join us for the live broadcast on Saturday, December 9th, as we kick off the much anticipated HOPE launch event, the ultimate celebration of transparent governance. Get ready to immerse yourself in the unveiling of our visionary roadmap for this great nation. Tune in from 2 p.m. to hear from the dedicated members of HOPE, spearheaded by the dynamic Timothy Hamill-Smith, as they share their commitment to serving the people and the country right here on WESN, Content Capital. Saturday, December 9th, 2023, this live broadcast and event starts at 2 p.m. and is coming to viewers from Paria Suites Conference Center, La Romaine. Join us in embracing the core values of hope, honesty, opportunity, performance, empowerment. Be a part of the movement for a brighter and more transparent future.
The preceding was a paid political announcement.
From the sacred hallowed halls of the St. Joseph's Convent Chapel, this December 9th and 10th, join us for an evening of enchanting melodies and timeless tradition at Carols at the Convent, under the direction of John Thomas and Cecilia Salazar. Be captivated by the awe-inspiring performances of the award-winning St. Joseph's Convent Choir, Port of Spain, alongside their esteemed special guests. Tickets are $200 and are available at select outlets: St. Joseph's Convent Office, the Abercrombie Tea Shop, the Living Water Bookshop, and Kitchen Corner along Circular Mall, or call 625-4502 for more information. Don't miss this musical masterpiece where every note resonates with the spirit of the season. Carols at the Convent. Get your tickets today.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations.
6 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Chaguanas, C3 Center Branch, Christmas Store at C3 San Fernando, and Eastgate Mall, Trin City.
Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We use it to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Have a content capital Christmas. It's the best time of the year. Now I know we have no snow, but Christmas is still here. Ho ho, the Christmas shows each week for all to see. Movie classics wait for you and our local content for free. Have a content capital Christmas, and in case you didn't hear, oh by golly, have a content capital Christmas this year.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh, available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando, paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
As the fact itself that the war has been dragging on for so long and we don't really see that any side has a strategic operational advantage at this point creates some further tensions. The fact that the Senate has blocked the supplemental funding bill that included a substantial financial aid for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan is an indication that there are definitely cracks when it comes to securing further funding for Ukraine. And in this case, the case of Ukraine is the most problematic one, because we have seen that when it comes to Israel support, for instance, there has been more unity within even within the Republicans.
Is this also a measure of how many countries around the world are turning really more inward, or becoming more, not nationalist per se, but being more preoccupied with what's happening inside of their borders than outside?
Well, many countries are very much preoccupied in terms of making sure politicians within many countries are preoccupied to make sure that they get enough votes next year. And we see that there are a lot of important elections coming up next year within the US, of course, and in Europe as well. That would be the primary goal of politicians, to secure the continuous support. And we also see the rise of disinformation that is very much in line with the Russian interests in terms of making sure that there are divisions within the European society and within the US society. And some questions are being asked whether or not it is sustainable to push forward further packages to sustain and support Ukraine's effort to fight against Russian aggression. I think it is very important, and Biden has highlighted that many times, to make sure that politicians in Europe and in the US make the public understand that this is not just Ukraine's effort. This is a war that will have fundamental impact on the future of democracy and future of Europe as well. And this is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. And I think his expectation and what he's counting for is that in due course, the Western support will fade away and Ukraine will be left on its own against the Russian aggression.
Well, we're seeing his more kind of hardy appearances recently, where it's kind of he's coming out of his bunker, if you will, making more international appearances. Maybe that has already started this kind of "I told you so" attitude that he has, that a feeling victorious even before the victory, at least in the long run.
Well, Putin is very, very far away from any sort of victory, but at the same time, he needs to be present. He needs to underline the fact that Russia still has some allies, and Russia is still able to work with other countries other than European nations and the United States. It still has some allies and economic and trade relations with those countries that are not in line with the EU and Western efforts to pushing forward the sanctions against the Russian regime. And that is a very important image for Putin, because there have been a lot of questions asked, even among the traditional Russian allies, whether or not Russia is still a reliable partner, because Russia has been very much weakened by the Western unity and Western efforts. However, the main question is that this is not enough to make sure that Ukraine comes out of this war victorious. And the main question is how much the West is willing to continue supporting Ukraine in a long-term perspective.
So from the West's perspective, can we say that Russia is stronger than the West believed it was in the end?
Well, I don't really think that the West had any sort of false optimistic overview that Russia would be defeated in a short-term perspective. I think it is very much obvious that Putin sees this war effort as a legacy-defining effort for himself, and he's very much committed, because this is almost, I would say, that a case of his survival as a political leader within Russia. He needs at least some kind of victory in Ukraine. So it is very much obvious that despite all the failures that we have seen on the ground in Ukraine, and as well as some cracks within the political system that we have witnessed this summer, for instance, when Prigozhin undermined the regime, at least for a couple of weeks. But still, I think Putin is willing to continue this effort, because it is very, very important for him that he takes at least some kind of victory to make sure that he remains in power in a long-term perspective.
Nadia Sescuria, thank you so much for joining us live there from London. You are Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you so much for answering our questions. Moving on to other world news now, and it's the first time in 4 years that Chinese and EU leaders are holding an in-person meeting. The European Union's President Ursula von der Leyen, European Council President Charles Michel, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell are in Beijing. They underlined the difficulties for foreign companies to access the Chinese market.
First, both China and the European Union believe in dialogue. We believe we will be able to increase trust and understanding and dispel doubts to find better ways of managing differences and expanding cooperation. Second, both China and the EU believe in cooperation and are opposed to decoupling with China. Decoupling is neither desirable nor possible. We have a strong economic relationship. Last year, our trade volume was over $800 billion, so our economic interests are deeply intertwined. And the third constant is that both China and the EU stand for peace and resolving conflict.
I would like to express our strong will to maintain and consolidate dialogue with China on 3 main principles. First, transparency. Second, foreseeability. Third, reciprocity. Of course, we want to promote our key values, democracy, human rights, and we want to defend some legitimate interests, which we will discuss. Trade between the European Union and China is at a very high level. We want to talk about the need to rebalance these trade relations.
Now it's time for today's Focus Report, and for Beijing, Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and though the Chinese Communist Party has never governed the archipelago, it repeats this sentence both for its domestic and international audience time and again. In Taiwan, however, the historical narrative is at the heart of political debates, especially during this electoral season. For more, our report from Taipei, Lucy Barbansag and Adrian Samore.
It's National Day in Taiwan, and a colourful parade shines the spotlight on the archipelago's various ethnic groups.
This year, the focus is on southern China's Minnan culture, but every year it's different. Sometimes it's indigenous or Hakka.
Organisers dubbed the event Taiwan National Day, a decision that's become somewhat controversial. By not using the official name Republic of China, some opposition figures accused the government of renouncing the island's Chinese heritage, accusations that members of the ruling party deny.
When I was young, our history books only taught us Chinese history, not Taiwanese. We're still teaching history, but we've added parts of Taiwan's past that the Chinese Nationalist Party left out. We are trying to decolonize our history.
Beijing claims Taiwan has been Chinese since ancient times and makes no secret of its desire to fully annex it, even by force. In this context, historical narrative is a politically sensitive issue. For this member of the opposition, Kuomintang, Taiwan is Chinese. The evidence, according to him, is Taiwan's National Palace Museum, with its 700,000 Chinese objects.
This bronze tripod is very old. It dates back almost 4,000 years. It's an extremely important piece because it symbolizes the continuity of the state in China.
Nationalists brought back antiques like this to Taiwan during the Chinese Civil War. In 1949, the Kuomintang took refuge on the island and quickly put into place a one-party state, whilst promoting Chinese nationalism. Though the opposition party has toned down this rhetoric with time, it's still one of their core values.
Of course, some people would like to create a new Taiwanese culture, but for me, it's useless. You won't find another culture in Taiwan that's as important and that can replace all of these treasures. What could ever fill the void after?
Yet Taiwan has been home to indigenous communities for thousands of years. This valley is home to the Paiwan tribe, one of the 16 Aboriginal ethnic groups that live on the archipelago today. This teacher is related to the local tribe's chief. On top of the official curriculum, she makes sure her students learn about indigenous culture.
In our classes, we talk about the spiritual side of Paiwan culture, the connection with ancestors and spirits, and also about our rituals. Look at the walls. We also teach them about plants, the environment, and objects from our culture.
Today, she takes her students to the Malyuva Festival, a major Paiwan event that takes place every 5 years. The highlight is a bull spearing competition. The gods are said to bring good fortune to the winners and their families.
When I share what I've learned back home with my family, it makes me feel smart and intelligent.
For centuries, Paiwan history has been denigrated and their language suppressed.
The Dutch colonialists, the Qing dynasty Chinese, the Japanese, the Kuomintang, when they all came to Taiwan, they never respected our self-determination. From our point of view, this is the reality. We have been colonized.
Different settlers forced their languages onto the locals. First Japanese, then Mandarin became the official language spoken in the archipelago. This linguistic enthusiast is passionate about local dialects. He records the voices of the elders in this village in order to document Paiwan history.
We are creating a Wikipedia in Paiwan, because when Paiwan people want to learn things about their own culture, they have no choice but to learn about it in Chinese.
At home, he speaks Taiwanese Hokkien, another one of the national languages that is distinct from Mandarin. Not all of his friends speak it fluently, though.
In Taiwan, classes are taught in Mandarin. It's not surprising that we are threatened with unification by China. It's easy for China to teach us to be Chinese. Classes should be in Taiwanese.
Until recently, we didn't even know our own history. It was easy for others to come and teach us their version of our history, and that was a way to rule us. But now we've had democratization and a change in the ruling party.
With neighboring Beijing ramping up its claims over the island, Taipei's national narrative has become a political battleground. Whilst politicians in this lively democracy continue their debates, polling shows that less and less people in Taiwan identify themselves as Chinese and more as simply Taiwanese.
And we'll be back in just a few minutes with more news. Do stay with us on France 24.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches. Bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Good, thanks for joining us. Peace again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Best of culture every day on France 24. With exclusive interviews with the most talked about people in entertainment, Arts 24's Eve Jackson and Olivia Salazar-Winspear bring you the latest from the world of art and entertainment. Our critics Marjorie Hash and Florence Villeminot speak to the biggest names in music, and Lisa Nesselson and Deeptika Laurent share the newest must-see films and TV series.
Join us every day for the latest news from the world of culture on Arts 24.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Dono, attorney at law, and once again I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can watch us at all stations on WESN CC as well as Strictly Legal with RondellDono.com and our major podcasts. We have a next exciting episode and I have no stranger to this set, and his name is Mr. Farai Hove Masaisai of Hove & Associates, attorneys at law. And today we are going to discuss the topic of defamation in the digital age. How do we navigate this legal landscape? And of course, this is coming or stemming from a recent judgment that was just last week handed down by Justice Margaret Mohammed, where a social media blogger has been ordered to pay over $1 million to the North Central Regional Health Authority CEO, Mr. Dalvin Thomas, for defamation or for defaming him in a series of Facebook posts in 2020. And the decision was handed down just recently. And of course, I will have Mr. Masaisai just explain more. And of course, we go into how can this now, defamation and technology, how has the law basically expanded in this regard? Good day, Farai.
Good day, Mr. Donowa, and good day to your viewers and to your listeners. It's always a pleasure to be on this leading legal show, and definitely thank you for having me here today.
And it's a pleasure to have you, and I think you are probably the most frequent guest at this, almost as though you are my co-host.
Almost.
So thanks for taking the opportunity to be here. And of course, as I said, the topic today is defamation. Yeah. And first up, let me congratulate you and your firm, Hove & Associates, for leading the charge in this case once again on defamatory statements made via social media.
Correct.
Right. So let's discuss in terms of what exactly happened in this particular matter.
All right, so this is a judgment handed down by the High Court, Justice Margaret Y. Mohammed, on the 28th of September 2023. So it's a very recent judgment, and it's a very important judgment in that it adds to our legal jurisprudence in terms of the development of defamation and libel at that, where it comes to social media or posts on websites. The social media forum that this defamer chose to use was Facebook, but the principles of law would also apply to, say, Instagram and Twitter, and even these days WhatsApp. All right. So yes. So we in this matter we did represent the CEO of the NCRHA. He was defamed over a period of about 5 months. About 5 months.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So he had a broad back, patience of Job.
Wow.
All right, but he in that he was gathering his information, meaning the posts were up, the statements were being made, the libelous statements were being made by third parties, they were being republished, they were being shared, So he gathered his information wisely before making his claim. We would have sent a pre-action protocol, and the defendant would have issued an apology immediately. That would have been done through my instructing attorney. So there's a process in terms of before you go to court, you try to warn people first. But with defamation, sometimes you warn people and the damage is already done.
Now, if we can stick a pin just to get an overview of what constitutes, let's start with I know we did a program before, but what constitutes defamation?
Okay, so defamation is really tarnishing someone's character, bringing them down in the eyes of a third party. So as between myself and yourself, if we have a conversation without the cameras and I insult you or defame you, that is not defamation. It has to be said to a third party. So a third party has to be in the room to hear it. So even though you and your friend may argue as between one another, so long as it's not via emails where persons are copied or via social media where the whole world can see, that would not be constituted a defamatory statement. So it's really just saying things that will reduce someone in the eyes of a third party. And that is what they call defamation. And defamation comes in two forms. It can either be slander, where it's words said but no broadcast, and it can be libel, where it's words said or even words published. When I say published, it could be written or typed up, and it's sent out to a third party. So and there's a fine line with slander and libel when it comes to radio. So if the radio station has that, normally they should have a 15-second lag before things go out into the whole world. If it is they operate that efficiently, then certainly the slander would not get out. All right, so that would just be considered slander as opposed to libel. But if it goes out after the 50, then it will become libel, and libel carries a higher form of damages than, say, slander, because they view libel as being it's hard to bring back.
It's a permanent. I mean, it's a permanent structure. I mean, it's something permanent that is always there and will always be there.
Correct.
Regardless of if the defamer takes it down.
Takes it down. So even when persons say that, watch, my lord, my lady, I have deleted the post. Sometimes we find it because somebody shared it or somebody screenshot it and put it somewhere else. So once it's out there forever, and certainly it's hard to fix a good name. And that's why the courts over the years have keep increasing the damages awarded to persons when their name, their character has been defamed, because the nature of it is that persons would work their entire life to keep a good name.
And does it have to be a popular individual or someone who's...
well, certainly the more popular you are, the more damages you will get. But even if you are unpopular, and I use that word very guardedly, because everyone thinks they're popular. Even if you are not an influencer, you can still be compensated for your name. You may not get the million that Mr. Thomas would have gotten, but you certainly would get some sort of damages in tune with your reputation.
And coming back to this instant matter, in terms of the Facebook post, if you're at liberty to just state quickly what exactly were the statements that were made?
These were proper. The judgment is 70 pages. I'll put it in context.
Yes.
And in the judgment, the judge is compelled to restate verbatim what was said. So there were proper statements that the author thought was fact, which we were able to prove were false.
And what were the accusations?
They were accusing the CEO of misappropriating funds. Now, these defamatory statements took place in the heart of the COVID-19.
Okay.
The CEO of the NCRHA being the largest regional health authority in our jurisdiction, would have been in charge of the government's fight against the COVID-19 virus. And I know he always says that while he was standing in the gate of life and death, someone was there, an armchair journalist, there to defame his good name.
We have plenty of that.
So that being said, that was the context in which the defamation came. So he was doing his job, as best as he can. He was in charge of the Mount Hope Hospital. He was in charge of the Couva health facility and all the health facilities throughout the East-West Corridor and Central Trinidad. And at the same time, he had a lot of responsibilities. What the author was questioning was how he was conducting his affairs, accusing him of nepotism, accusing him of political victimization, accusing him of fraud, accusing him of mismanagement of public money.
And these posts were from March 2020 straight to June 2020. A couple instances, 24th of March.
For quite a long period of time.
25th of March, 30th of March, April, and it's just going on and on.
Correct. So some of the things that he was suggesting to third parties, meaning the entire Facebook universe, was that the CEO was mishandling public funds. He misappropriated public funds. He defrauded the state for his personal benefit. He favors P&M contractors. He's a liar. He's a fraud. He's a criminal. He received kickbacks. These were things that were said and were found to be false.
Because obviously, in his defense, I mean, the defense of defamation is the truth, not so? And proving.
Well, in this case, he did not raise a defense of justification. He raised a defense of Reynolds privilege, which is a journalistic defense for responsible journalism.
But therefore, does he qualify or does he pass the qualification of what is a journalist? So does he?
Well, I don't think the judge even had to go there. Under cross-examination, he admitted some of the posts. So most of the posts that he posted was admitted, but only under cross-examination. That's why a good thing is to get a good attorney.
Correct. Because you were able to elicit that evidence from him.
Only under cross-examination. Right?
That's the trick.
But for that, then the court would have had to look to see if he was a proper journalist in accordance with the Reynolds privilege test. Journalists in our jurisdiction are really the responsible journalists. And I would go as far as to say the Guardian medias, the One Caribbean medias, the different radio stations and so forth.
You mean in terms of who are legitimate?
Who the courts will consider as legitimate.
Okay.
All right. But there is a test in Reynolds privilege, and you have to exercise what they call responsible journalism.
Yes.
So what part of that test he would have failed abysmally, in that even though you are aware of information and you think the public would have a reasonable expectation of receiving that information, a responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment. So you'll hear in all reports, they would say, well, we tried to reach out to the Minister of Finance and we didn't get a comment at the time of running the story. But they tried. So that is what a responsible journalist does. They at least send a WhatsApp to the person, say, watch, this is the article we intend to run. Let us know your side of the story by, say, if the news is at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., let us know your side of the story by 5 p.m., please, or as we intend to run it. The court will see that as responsible journalism. If you choose not to respond to the journalist and then you respond only in court, then the court would say, well, they have a defense. All right? So his defense was Reynolds privilege and fair comment. He said the Mr. Davlin Thomas is a public official and he's open game. It need to be thick. But I think that open game defense works more with politicians. Davlin Thomas is not a politician in the purest of sense, in that he does not get a protection from any parliamentary privilege. So a lot of politicians, they will go and voice their dismay in Parliament where they are protected by what they say in Parliament. All right, Davlin Thomas didn't have that opportunity. And one of the leading cases would have been the Prakash and Prakash, where the two brothers defamed one another in a political environment. And the Privy Council would have said, watch, as politicians, you need to have a little banter. Your skin had to be a little broader, your back had to be broader. So it works amongst politicians, that defense, but certainly not with a lay person and an officer who's not elected.
Yes. And basically, obviously, the court found one that they did not take into consideration his defense, right?
Well, they took into consideration. The judge took into consideration his defense, but found that it was not made out.
Made out, correct. Yes, yes. And that would now render your case successful to that extent. Now, in terms of the trial, how long did the trial take place, and whether there were any witnesses?
Yes, so for witnesses on our side, we had Mr. Thomas, and he had a colleague, Mr. Robinson, Kwesi Robinson. So his witness was really to his character. So you need to have a character witness if you're saying that you're a person of good character. So you cannot defame someone who has a bad character.
Yeah.
So if someone is a known thief and you call him a thief, and you have a judgment from the court saying what he had been arrested for theft and served time, then he cannot go and sue you for defamation for calling him a thief, because he'll be speaking the truth.
Yes.
You know. So yes. So you have to have someone to at least speak to your character. Naturally, you can speak to your own character, so we would attach your CV, attach his accomplishments. So apart from being the CEO, he was a former councillor for Barataria. He's still the vice chairman of the National Carnival Commission. He serves on different committees. He's in the arts, the performing arts. His name is well known. So we put a dossier in terms of his work and his nationalistic work. So it's a name that he cherishes, and certainly he has children who carries his last name, so he would want to protect it. Yeah, so that goes in terms of, but in terms of how the trial went, the trial was 1 day. It was a one-day trial, and the other side they didn't bring any witnesses except themselves.
Right.
So you brought yourself, and naturally, if you only go by yourself, your evidence will be seen as self-serving because you're going to defend yourself. Normally, you bring witnesses
to testify your character to the truth of the issue.
Correct. So if you're saying you are a journalist, you should bring your producer, the person who you work for, if you're a journalist, you know, to build your credibility. Yeah. You know, the other thing was that he was flip-flopping on his defense, meaning initially he apologized via email, and then he withdrew the apology.
Oh, that's a question I was going to get at. Okay, I mean, I know one of the reliefs that you would ask or the asks
for an apology,
and well, whatever damages to be agreed. So he
initially apologized.
He apologized, right?
Yes, and then he said when he retained counsel, he indicated this was his story, which the court found to be a fallacy. He said how someone hijacked his Facebook profile. All right, so this goes out to anyone who wants to defame and say that somebody hijacked your Facebook or somebody hijacked your laptop and they defame. He said the person's name was Johnny Walker.
Yeah, that's a famous Facebook name.
So Johnny Walker hijacked his his Facebook, and Johnny Walker did most of the posting. So he admitted to some, but not to all. And then he withdrew the apology for the ones that he said Johnny Walker did. But on the balance of probabilities, which is the test in the civil arena, the judge found that there was no such Johnny Walker hijacking his Facebook profile.
Because obviously, I mean, that's
for such a long time.
To prove
March
that
to June. So what? Even when from March to June, you didn't report it to Facebook that someone has taken control of your Facebook profile. There was no evidence of that.
Yeah.
You know, the post came from Ramesh Siwa, and certainly that was the findings of the court.
Wow, that is interesting. Poor Johnny Walker. Right?
Johnny Walker. I think that's our alcohol.
That's precisely.
Beverage, yes.
Yeah, it's a famous name. And let's get in terms of case. So the court was on the claimant side in terms of their claim. Now let's deal with how the court assessed the damages, because it's quite a large number, almost $1 million. Well, when you look at costs, it probably is $1 million.
It probably crossed the million, because the court awarded interest at 2.5%.
And then we have seniors costs as well.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you have statutory interest at 5%.
Was this cost assessed or
no? The court gave liberty to apply if you wanted to be assessed, but the prescribed cost was pretty much.
Well,
it was over 100,000 in prescribed cost. So
right.
In these circumstances, I would not insist. So you can insist on your cost being assessed. So there's a difference between assessed cost and prescribed cost. Prescribed course is generally lower. It allows for access to justice so that persons would know with some level of certainty, based on the value of the case, how much cost they will have to pay to the other side if they lose.
Yeah.
With assessed cost, you really pay based on time spent by the attorney on the other side, and it normally runs up. It'll probably run up at least, a case like this would probably run at least 4 or 5 times the prescribed cost. So in this instance, we say the overall figure is okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Well, I mean, more than enough, of course.
It's okay. It's okay.
Well, I won't say more than enough because the higher you make, the more expenses you have, etc.
Yeah.
If you have counsel to pay, if you have
Correct.
this and that,
Correct.
the other. But of course, you know, in any event, you can't measure. I mean, as an attorney, yeah, you can't measure reputation addition. You can't really measure what the amount of work an attorney does compared to the monies that they receive. Yes, the people may say, well, attorneys get a lot of money, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of late nights. It's a lot of early mornings.
Correct.
Yeah, especially, I mean, having a family and still having to deal with your job or having multiple different matters to deal with at the same time.
Correct.
Because the law is a jealous mistress, as we were told.
A very jealous mistress.
And of course, a court doesn't want to know, well, I had a trial the day before, so I can't file submissions or whatever the case.
No, they would say, well, why didn't you hand up the brief? give it to another attorney.
Exactly. So
we was on quantum.
Yes, quantum.
We were on quantum. So how the court came to the figure. So I would read from at paragraph 140 of the judge's decision. This is what Justice Mohammed says. She says that it is settled law that awards of general damages for defamation must be considered in light of prior comparable awards. So what the judge did was not just dip in a hat and pick out a number. She carried out a judicial exercise by comparing like cases to Mr. Thomas's case. So she compared 6 cases. I'll name just a few of the 6 cases. So the matter with Anand Ramlogan, as he then was, the Attorney General, versus Jack Austin Warner. In 2015, the court awarded $800,000 in damages. That would have been general damages, aggravated damages, and exemplary damages. The matter of Ricardo Welch and Juliet Davey, the court awarded $700,000 in damages. The matter of Fayek Mohammed and Jack Warner, the court awarded $650,000 in damages. And a matter of Alfred Pierre, being an attorney, and Francis Moraine, the court awarded $900,000 in damages, and that was a 2019 matter.
Could you say why would the court have awarded such a high number? A high amount, sorry.
Because they kept increasing year upon year. So if we started from Anand Ramlogan and Jack Austin Warner, that was a 2015 judgment. And then the Ricardo Welch matter with the $700,000, that was a 2017 judgment. Then the court also cited the Andrew Gabriel and Philip Edward Alexander judgment. That was a $775,000 in 2019. So every year it goes up, just as inflation. So you have to make way for that. So from 2019 to 2023, you could see the rationale why the judge went with a figure of, well, it was about $900,000 in damages when you think of the general and the exemplary. So it was showing that the jurisprudence in our jurisdiction is that the damages for defamation is gradually increasing. It's not increasing astronomically, but it's increasing incrementally. Yeah. And she observed the dynamics of the personality, a public servant, I'd say a high-ranking public official, the CEO of the NCRHA, the circumstances in which he was being defamed, in circumstances where he was doing his job, representing the country in terms of facing the COVID virus.
Yeah, and I'm saying, and I'm certain, sorry to cut you across, but in addition to that period of COVID when the whole world is going through an issue.
Correct.
And your focus really is on making sure that you protect a life or save lives.
Save lives.
And you have someone is trying to now They don't distract you.
Distract.
And I'm sure the court may have taken all that into consideration.
At minimum, you can say distract. At maximum, you say defame.
Yeah.
All right. So he was a distraction initially, but it came to a head when his superiors started questioning his integrity. So sometimes you try to ignore noise.
Yeah.
And certainly, I always say heavy is the head that wear the hat. You know, it's hard being a leader.
Yeah.
And certainly to lead such a large organization, you have to have, sometimes you have to be tunnel focused and focus. So what he was doing was focusing. Even when I was telling him, let us send the pre-action now, and he was like, not now, because then he would have to change his focus from dealing with a pressing issue, life and death, to dealing with an issue that is personal to him. So credit to him that he held up for a while, but when we approached the court saw no issue in terms of issuing what you call an interim injunction. So there was an interim injunction in place for him to remove all the posts and to cease and desist. As we know, time goes on in terms of litigation. So this matter was filed in 2020. We got a decision in 2023.
Of course, notwithstanding COVID and the, you know, there were a lot of court-bed suspension of the time.
Correct. So we make no qualms to that because we had the interim injunction in place. So that was a form of relief so that he could focus on his job. And that is how you call it, a tool that persons who are defamed can use. They can use the interim remedies of the court to at least maintain the status quo. The status quo being to ask the person to stop.
Yeah.
You know, stop what you're doing. Let us let the court decide if what you're doing is defamatory or not. All right, but don't just keep doing it, and you're just frustrating my life while the court is trying to make a decision.
No, I recall just earlier you stated that he had apologized to the defendant, but I don't think we got into the reason for his withdrawal.
Yes.
He sought counsel.
Well, he said he sought counsel, and the apology was made without counsel's advice.
Okay, fair enough. Until such time.
Correct.
All right, let's take a pin there. Yes. We'll be right back after we take this break. You're watching Strictly Legal.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain, and it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
And we are back on Strictly Legal with my guest, Mr. Farai Hove Masaisai, Senior Partner of Hoves & Associates. We are speaking on the defamation and technology, and before the break, we were dealing with the quantum in terms of the award of damages that the court awarded to the defendant, Mr. Thomas. I know we spoke all over the place in terms of the interest, etc., but just in terms of the precise award.
Okay. All right. So we had just left off where we were comparing the last authority of Alfred P. and Francis Morin, where the court would have awarded $900,000 in damages, and that was in 2019. Yeah. So if we fast forward to 2023, which would have been about that's 4 years. Yeah. 4 years. So 4 years going forward, we see that the court ordered. So in terms of the order, they say judgment for the claimant, and judgment for the claimant means that the claimant has won its case. So it's not that the court is passing judgment on the claimant. So it's judgment for the claimant, meaning the claimant has proven its case and it has won its case. And then it goes on to speak as to what is your fruits of your judgment. So the fruits of the judgment for the claimant would be that the defendant has to pay him general damages in the sum of $800,000. That general damages will carry an interest rate of 2.5% from the 24th of June 2020, which was when he filed his claim, to the date of judgment, which is the September date in 2023.
And that is statutory interest? Or
no, that's just interest based on the going rate that the court awards interest on your damages.
So usually that's about 3 or 4%?
Yeah,
right?
well, it can range. So I've seen it as low as 1.5. I've seen it as high as even the 5.
So in terms of this matter, what the court awarded?
The court awarded 2.5%. 2.5% on 800,000 over 4 years is...
That's a lot.
It's nice. It's a pretty little penny there.
That's a lot.
You know, and then the defendant has to pay exemplary damages. So because of the outrageousness of the behavior, how it was concerted over many months, it was a concerted attack. The court said, here, what? 800,000 is not enough. So you have to pay 100,000 on top of that. So that would be 900,000. The court then granted injunctions. So the injunctions...
There's 100,000 he got for exemplary damages.
Extra, yeah. So that'll be, take it 900,000 and then you have your interest on top of that. So that alone might cross the million, right? Then you have the injunctions, so that the defendant, whether by himself, his servant and or agents, could be the very well Johnny Walker. who he says hijacked his device. They are restrained from publishing or causing to be published or republished any word statements or innuendos. So you can't even refer by innuendo anything defamatory of the claimant as complained in the pre-action. And
an innuendo could be basically you saying something without saying the person's name.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, because then they would already know that this is the person.
You could say head of NCRHA. Okay, well, who's the head?
Yeah.
So, and the restraint is to his Facebook page, and the court quotes his Facebook page. The court also ordered an apology, a public apology and retraction in writing of the allegations made in the post and authored by him and published on the Facebook profiles and the profiles of the third parties. And then the court finally ordered that he pay costs, and the courts quantified those costs at $101,500. So those were the type of damages that the court awarded. I think the court wanted to send also a message to the armchair journalists who would think, would not think twice before they post. So I would suggest that you think twice, 3 times, and probably seek a legal opinion before you post something that is demeaning or not factual about a third party. In this case, the person who was posting did not even know Mr. Thomas. So that was one of the questions we would have posed under cross-examination. If it is that you're accusing him of all these things, is it that you know him? So why did you come to the conclusion that he did these things? You know, so you have to be sure of what you're saying, sure of the greater the gravity of your speech, you have to do your due diligence. So it has to be backed up. So if it is you're saying that someone stole something, make sure you have your evidence that they stole that before you say it.
And I know during the break we were just chatting about, in terms of how the law has advanced. Like 10 years ago, Facebook posts wouldn't even be considered a defamatory statement.
Correct. Correct. I think before Facebook there was high five.
And then Facebook was really, maybe we were in university during that time. That was a university. You had to have a university email
correct.
Right? To join Facebook. And how technology has advanced, whereby now in the jurisprudence they are using that, as case law.
Even Twitter.
Twitter.
So you can get sued for a tweet. So careful how you tweet.
Yeah. Any social media platform down to this thing
Instagram,
that people use now. TikTok that I refuse to join.
Yes.
No,
you can use it. Everything can be used for good and everything can be used for bad. Yes. It depends on what you choose to use it for. So some persons may use social media to boost their profile, boost their business. That is a good thing. But then some persons may use it to tear down someone. Yeah. And certainly that is where the courts come in. You can't just tear down someone's reputation that they may have built for their entire lives. And in some cases, their family name and expects no repercussions.
And another thing is the defamatory statements made via WhatsApp too. That is where there has been changes in law where the minute you post something like, while yes, it could be a private conversation, but then when you forward...
Once you screenshot, if you screenshot and you want to forward to a third party, then you better have your court closed.
Exactly, so people have to be mindful what they say on WhatsApp, who they say it to, all the different
those
things.
WhatsApp chats.
The group chats,
the nature of it, WhatsApp has expanded the number of members that could join a chat.
Yes.
So just be careful when you want to argue with someone in a heated... You might get hot and flustered and you say something which you ought not to have said, but then 50 people in the 200 chat sees it.
And even screenshots, because they love to screenshot fast before you even...
No, correct.
Before you even delete.
Correct.
Before you even get the opportunity to delete.
Before you be able to delete all. And remember to delete all and don't just delete for yourself. No, I think social media should really be taught in schools now in terms of using it responsibly.
It would be interesting to know though, just it would be interesting to know whether or not, even if a supposedly defamatory statement was made and you delete it at the first possible opportunity right away, that delete all feature, whether the court can use that as sufficient defense to say, well, at the end of the day, it did not transmit.
Now, in
larger population.
WhatsApp, there is that feature to see how many persons have seen your posts. All right, so the burden is always on the claimant to prove their case. So they would have to prove that third parties saw it. So even if you post
that might be hard
group,
because if they are not the author, they won't be able to know how many people see it.
Well,
unless you are the author.
Unless you bring somebody from the chat.
Yes.
Gretchen, I know we in the same chat, but I need to get 1 million. Come and get some evidence there. So you need to get your witnesses. The court is a court of evidence. So it's not about hearsay. You have to bring the person who actually saw it. So at least one person should have seen it, and they can give evidence on your behalf.
So technology is really advancing, and of course this in itself is just one of many.
It's just one of many,
right? I mean, I know a lot of persons. Defamation occurs every day, but when we look at the monies now you have to spend, that's another factor too in terms of seeking legal counsel. I mean, how many lawyers may do this for pro bono until they get an award? And then you also have to look at, yes, you are given an award, but whether the defendant has the means to pay the award, that's another consideration.
So that deals with enforcement.
Yes.
So with enforcement, there are different ways of enforcing. Certainly, I wouldn't want to let the cat out of the bag in terms of what we're going to do, but there are many ways to enforce a judgment, including contempt of court proceedings, where persons can be put into jail for not complying with a court order, seizure of property, garnishee orders, and so forth. So there are different methods to enforce a court order, but a court order is a court order, and we have to respect that.
Like, for instance, I would advise my clients, particularly when it comes to defamatory statements, yes, send your pre-action, I mean, we can send pre-action protocol letter and all these different things, but sometimes you find that there are people who make defamatory statements, they don't even own a house, they don't even own any assets, you know? So it's whether or not, well, yes, some people may want to go all the way to clear their name.
Correct.
So sometimes either clear their name or you want the money.
I suppose the higher you are in terms of the reputation chain, you want to vindicate your name.
Correct.
So it may not be about the money. For Mr. Thomas, it was never about the money, it was really about the vindication of his good name. So it depends. Some persons may say, well, I want to vindicate my name, but still mature, not to go to university.
Correct, yeah.
You know, so
I mean, if it's a defender with means, yeah.
Correct.
And this goes to the publishing company. I know this is a Facebook matter, but for instance, if defamatory statements were made by an individual on a television program.
Correct. So you're allowed, because of the law of vicarious liability, to go against the employer as well. So if it's
and usually that's where you get the monies. That's where the monies will come if you have a good case.
They are liable individually and separately. So you can choose who to get, but you can't get the same amount from everybody.
From everyone.
You know, so that's why I suppose most employers now, they would put something in the employment contract to protect them from that vicarious liability if they are hiring a loose cannon. You know? and
I'm assuming this is the case with Facebook. That's why Facebook is not party to litigation.
No,
because
they have disclaimers and
policies.
Different policies that if they basically wash their hands from what the user does there in that jurisdiction. So yeah, so for us to sue Facebook, we would actually have to go to their jurisdiction. It would be a jurisdictional issue, but it doesn't prevent us from pursuing the Facebook user in our jurisdiction. Yeah.
No. For a small country, do you think that we are? I mean, we are a litigious society. I believe so.
I think we are.